Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're just going to give another 30 seconds to allow people to join us. The lobby is quite busy today, so just trying to admit as many people as possible. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. Welcome to the online dissemination of the Seed Sector Performance Index 2023 Status Report for Africa. We're thrilled to have you join us today from all corners of the globe. It's so amazing to think that we're all connected, despite our different time zones. For example, it is 7 a.m. where I am. While we wait for everyone else to sign in, I warmly welcome you to just take a second, find the chat box, and enter into the chat box the city and country and organization that you're signing in from today. And even the local time, we're always interested in that as well. It's always fascinating to see the diversity in our audience. So just take a second to do that while we wait for others to join. So before we dive into the presentation for today, we have just a few housekeeping reminders. We're all used to this. We all know the drill at this point. All microphones are muted throughout the session, just to avoid any background noise, as we know. The mics will be unmuted to allow for questions and comments during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. The chat box can be used throughout the session for light touch questions. But we do ask that when using the chat box that you ask a question in the chat box that will be monitored by our team member, Mainza Mugoya, but also include the slide number, which you can find in the corner of the slide. So just sort of look for that slide number, ask your question in the chat box, and we will try our best to address those during the presentation. Also, please hold any substantial questions until the Q&A session, which will be monitored by Krisztina Tihanyi. So please do that with the Q&A session. As we get closer to the Q&A session, we'll give some more instructions and guidelines for that, just to allow those who are joining us a bit later to also have a full understanding of how we're going to run that portion of the session. At the end, we will also share a link with you. You can actually find the link now pinned to the top of the chat box, and that's just to welcome any of your feedback and comments regarding today's session. We are quite excited about today's session and look forward to a robust discussion and a deep dive into the findings. So now I would like to turn the platform over to my colleague, Mainza Mugoya, the regional coordinator for TASAI, who will take it from here and further introduce our speakers for today. Mainza, the platform is yours.
Thank you very much, Shon. Thank you for giving those housekeeping remarks to get us started. I echo your welcome. I think everyone should be welcome to this SSPI seminar, the Seed Sector Performance Index. This is the first report for Africa, and I'm very pleased we can have this discussion with everyone. So before we get into the full gist of the presentation, we are planning at least 30 minutes of the presentations, followed by another 30 minutes of Q&A. Before we get into that, I'd like to invite two speakers who are very good friends of TASAI, but also have been very keen sponsors and supporters of the SSPI. The first speaker I would like to invite is Dr. George Bigirwa, who is the Director for the Center of Excellence in Seed Systems in Africa, CESA. He's at AGRA. AGRA was the prime sponsor for the SSPI work, and they've been not just financially involved, but technically involved from the very, very beginning, all the way up to the end. And we're very proud of that partnership and that collaboration, which has been really, really strong. So I'll give the floor to George. George, you have a few minutes to give a few remarks on behalf of AGRA. George, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Mainza. Esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this important webinar, where we are going to share key findings from the Seed Sector Performance Index. This event marks a significant milestone as this work contributes to the African Union CAADP Biennial Review, with the seed having been included for the first time among the vital indicators for consideration. I extend my gratitude to the leadership of the African Union for recognizing the crucial role of seed in enhancing crop productivity. And indeed, it all begins with seed. I also want to thank our donors, particularly the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and USAID, for their invaluable support in enabling AGRA to conduct this important study. AGRA remains committed to this initiative, and as a testimony to this, we have allocated funds for the next round of study. I encourage all stakeholders and in various countries to respond positively when time comes for this next round of study. Again, it will be carried out by TASAI, so open their doors when they reach out to you. As part of AGRA under the Center of Excellence for Seed Systems, CESA, we are dedicated to improving and strengthening the seed subsector across the continent. Our recent focus has been on supporting countries in assessing their national seed systems, leading to the development of seed investment plans. These plans highlight the existing gaps and provide recommendations to address them effectively. In closing remarks, I would like to urge governments and development partners to utilize the seed assessment tool, SeedSat, which is already available. This tool can help you understand your seed system status, identify gaps, and implement strategies for improvement, just as we undergo medical checks to assess our health. So knowing the status of your seed system will prepare you for the next round of SSPI assessments. CESA is here to support you. Please feel free to reach out or visit the AGRA CESA website to learn more about our services and offerings. Thank you, and I wish you a fruitful and interactive webinar.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, George, for those remarks. We thank you because AGRA has been a very consistent partner on this exercise, but other exercises on seed sector development, not just for TASAI, but for others. And we're very grateful for that support. So before we get into the full gist of the presentation, we're hoping to have some other remarks from the African Union Commission. We're still waiting for them to join. They're currently in one of the annual review meetings in Morocco, so they're a bit engaged, but when they do have time, they'll join us and deliver their remarks. Because a number of people have joined since the housekeeping announcements by Shon earlier, I'll just echo some of these few announcements. If you have some comments you want to make in the course of the presentation, please put them in the chat. Where possible, quote the slide number so we can easily track and see for easy reference for us when we're giving a response to those comments. We'll try and address as many comments as we can in the chat. Those that we can't address in the chat, we'll address them during the open Q&A session after the main presentation. So the way we've set it up, we have around 30 minutes of main presentation and then remaining 30 minutes for open Q&A discussion. So with that, I would like to invite Professor Ed Mabaya, the TASAI seed sector expert and scientific advisor, who will take us through the beginning part of the presentation and hand over to Michael to finish us off with the findings. So Ed, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mainza. I hope you can all hear me well. Greetings from Cornell University. It's such a great joy to be here sharing this exciting report that's been really a culmination of 2 years of consultation, analysis, and fine-tuning. We're going to present over the next 30 minutes a 218-page report. So please bear with us as we try to go as fast as we can. The report is available online, but we really want to leave enough room for Q&A and discussion. So as Mainza pointed out, each slide, if you see in the top right-hand corner, has got a slide number. If you want to ask a question that's specific to a slide, please cite that so that the people that are in the back end can also see exactly what you're referring to. So welcome again, and with that, I will launch into my presentation here. So the presentation is going to be structured as follows. I'll give you a little bit of background and introduction. We'll discuss some of the methods that TASAI used and its partners to collect the data and information. I'll also share something about the country reports that is quite a highlight of this report. Then I'll switch over to my colleague Michael, who is going to talk about these SSPI findings by indicator and give some conclusions and acknowledgements. So why did we do this project SSPI? What is the rationale behind it? So SSPI is a tool that is designed to provide a bird's eye view of the health of seed sectors across African countries. As you already heard from my colleague, Dr. Bigirwa, there's other tools there that go in depth on very, very specific issues that are country focused. TASAI is doing that, and so too is SeedSat. This tool here is really meant to give you a wide sector perspective of the entire continent. This was is demanded by AUC under the 4th biannual review process, which this is a part of. Also demanded by key partners, including AGRA, AFDB, Gates, USAID, and other partners that wanted to use this, also as a monitoring and evaluation tool to set targets and have counterfactuals. This kind of tool does not currently exist on the continent. This is the first time that this is being done. Much more importantly, we really hope that a tool like this creates this race to the top among the African countries. Now, to take a look at the methods, another very lengthy process. We went through a year of refining the methodology for the study, but I'll save you the details. We ended up with a list of 17 indicators. Initially, started off from 170 indicators compiled from a combination of TASAI, SeedSat, and a few other partners. This was then distilled to 30 indicators in a very long consultative process, which we further trimmed down to 17. So think of this as a 17-point inspection of a seed sector, not comprehensive by any measure, but there are 5 indicators here that are around breeding and variety release and maintenance, 3 that are around commercial production and trade, 2 that are around farmer engagement, 4 that capture the policy dynamics, and 3 that are around the quality assurance and industry support. We'll go into details of each one of those during the session where my colleague Michael is going to present the key findings. What did we do to get here? How did we collect this information? Well, okay, it looks like my slide is not moving. Okay, so the preparation for data collection was also very lengthy. The tool was in English, French, and Arabic. We had experts that were identified through CADA focal point and TASAI contacts, and we trained national seed experts to use this tool that was online and printed in paper. And we recruited regional seed experts to assist with the follow-up with national seed experts and ensuring data quality throughout. So the enterprise itself, the backstage work was quite lengthy and quite involved, and involved many, many partners that were involved in that process. In the end, when you have this many indicators, 17, one of the questions that people ask is that, do those 17 indicators all have the same weight? Are some of them more important than others? So to answer that question, we did a survey of 257 seed sector stakeholders from 36 countries. And the analysis, we're asking them to weigh the relative importance of every indicator. What you see there, the conclusion was that in general, they were all weighed at about the same level of strength. So you will see that in our reporting, we do place equal importance across all the different 17 indicators. In terms of indicator scoring and computation, we use a combination of qualitative and quantitative indicators. The qualitative indicators are mostly based on expert opinion, but we really provided a very strict rubric on how each indicator was going to be scored to minimize bias. We tried to normalize most of the indicators so that it's easy to compare one country to the other one. We had some few challenges here and there, but ultimately every indicator that you're going to see in this report is ranked on a scale from 0 to 10, where it goes from extremely poor in red to excellent in the dark green. So if you don't remember anything else at all, remember these colors, much like a traffic light. Red is bad, orange is not so poor, yellow is fair, light green is good, and dark green is excellent. And you keep those in mind as we're going through the different scores and indicators. The scoring of the indicators, each one of them was a little bit different. Take, for example, number of varieties released. We're seeking data from variety release catalog. And for that indicator, we had a 4-tier system where, the ultimate number that a country gets was actually based on the scores within different tiers. When it comes to some indicators such as adequacy of National Agricultural Research Institution, we had sub-indicators. For example, number of breeders, funding for breeding programs, and basic research infrastructure. All these add up to one indicator in the end. Similarly, with access to adequacy to early generation seed, we measured the quality, the quantity, and the timeliness of delivery. So I'm just encouraging you to dig deeper into these indicators where you can actually find more information under each one of them. Similarly, with a few other indicators, using quantitative and qualitative indicators. Sorry, I think I went backwards there. And one of the indicators that we looked at is utilization of quality commercial seed, and this is measured as a score where we take the volume of available commercial seed, production plus imports less export, and we divide that by the national seed requirement that is either computed by seeding rates or provided by the countries themselves. In the end, we selected 4 key crops per country. Ultimately, this led to 30 crops being selected across the 47 countries. The 10 most important crops were rice, maize, sorghum, groundnut, bean, millet, wheat, cassava, cowpea, and soybean. Djibouti and Seychelles, that don't have a very strong agricultural sector, chose to go with vegetables and fruit crops. This being the first time we're doing such an exercise, we experienced a few challenges. We just want to be upfront and honest with some of these. There were some issues distinguishing between de facto and de jure states, especially related to policy instruments. The influence of the development stage of the country might have influenced some of the qualitative scores, where early stage countries tend to want to rank themselves a little bit higher, based on where they are. And whereas more developed countries such as Kenya were much more critical, so we had to do some fine tuning to that. There was lack of up-to-date data on several indicators. There was also some methodological challenges when it came to vegetatively propagated crops such as sweet potatoes and cassava that we're still trying to work out. There was also, we needed to align this process that we're carrying out with the biannual review process that was set by AUC. So this was part of a longer ongoing process. And not all countries had structured procedures for data collection, which made it very difficult for us to have a consistent correlation of data and the final validation as well. But we were able to overcome some of that. The final validation and data after the review was also a little bit challenging in a few countries, but like I said, again, we did overcome some of these challenges. Now, just to highlight here that in the report that is available online, you can actually access the individual country report. So if, for example, you wanted to look at Malawi, there is an in-depth 3-page report given in the document, and they're listed by alphabetical order. And for each country, you can see a very somewhat detailed analysis that gives you the overview of the seed sector and background statistics. We score each indicator, and there's an explanation of why that I would have scored at that level. We also give an overall score of the regional block where the country is part of, and we highlight some key priorities for intervention, and we also acknowledge the people that actually conducted the work in the country. So please feel free to dig into the country reports. And just to give you now the overall summary of what we found out, we ended up with 47 countries that were surveyed. We could not get data for Algeria, Cape Verde, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, and Mauritius, and West Sahara. Overall, 12 countries. You can see South Africa here scored excellent, the only country that scored excellent. Then there's a belt here that goes from Zimbabwe, Zambia, Tanzania, Kenya, Ethiopia, Egypt, and Nigeria. These were scored as good. Fair, you can see the Sahel region, Namibia and Botswana were scored at fair, and Tunisia. And then you start to get into poor, that's orange countries, mostly Central Africa, Mauritania, Libya, Guinea. And extremely poor was Congo, Brazzaville, and Somalia were scored as poor. And with that, I'm going to hand out to my colleague, Michael, who is going to give the scores for each of the different indicators. And with that, I'll hand over to Michael.
Thank you, Ed, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. So I'll continue the presentation from where Ed started. You can see my slides. So the first slide is the indicator on quality of varietal release process. And what you're measuring here is how the process is, whether it's defined, understood, and followed by public and private breeders and the regulatory agencies. Overall, 12 countries scored between 8 and 10. The countries being shown in green, dark green, which implies that the varietal release process, as defined in the regulatory instruments, are well understood and followed. 12 countries scored between 6 and less than 10, which is good, the light here, green, but not the best, showing that the process is clearly defined, but it's not followed fully. 14 countries scored between 4 and 6, showing that the varietal release process is not yet fully operational, or it is new, while 5 countries have no varietal release processes, and these are the countries shaded in red. The second indicator is number of varieties released between the period of 2020 and 2022 for the top 4 priority crops in that country. And we have assumed a linear relationship on the number of varieties released. That is for varieties 1 to 50, the score is 1 to 8. And for 51 to 100 varieties, the scores are greater than 8 to 10. And for over 100 varieties, the score is 10. This linear approach allows us to capture the stage of the seed sector in the growth process within a country. To give some examples, the highest releases were South Africa, Zambia, Burundi, and Mali. And then more than 70% of the varieties released are maize. As you can see there, Burkina Faso with the 24 varieties, Egypt with 23, Ghana 27 out of 30, Kenya 32 out of 36. And the bad news is that some 13 countries did not release any varieties of any of the 4 crops, and highlighting the underinvestment in breeding programs or that there are challenges with the variety release process. However, there is some silver lining here that countries that are not able to have their own varieties are accessing varieties from the regional catalogs, and we have examples of countries like Uganda accessing the COMESA one, Angola, Eswatini, and Mozambique accessing varieties from the Southern African Development Corporation Community SADC catalog. Indicator number 3 is on the adequacy of the National Agricultural Research Institutes. And as Ed indicated, the sub-indicators are number of breeders, funding, and breeding infrastructure. And the overall score is the average of the 3 aspects by 4 crops. So the average of 12 sub-scores. The findings are that Egypt, Zambia, Ethiopia, Burkina, Uganda, and Botswana scored the highest, indicating they have good number of breeders and the breeding infrastructure is okay. 20 countries scored poor or extremely poor, and this was mainly driven by low number of breeders, erratic funding, and breeding programs relying mainly on external funding, which was erratic and unpredictable, and the breeding infrastructure was either obsolete or dilapidated. Some 5 countries there, Angola, Eswatini, Lesotho, Mauritania, and Somalia, do not have active breeding programs. So what you have there, they don't have breeders, but they have technicians who conduct adaptation trials for varieties picked from other countries. Indicator number 4 is the status on plant genetic resources for food and agriculture. And some 39 countries that you can see in the dark green and light green, have national programs that coordinate these activities. In 15 countries, the entity is standalone or autonomous with autonomous government institution. In 22 countries, the entity is a department in the Ministry of Agriculture or in the National Agricultural Research Institute. The major challenge faced by these entities across the board is lack of sufficient funding, which limits their capacity to collect, characterize, and conserve plant genetic resources. Indicator number 5 is on adequacy of early generation seed, and the sub-indicators are the quantity of seed delivered, the second one is quality of the seed that is delivered, and the third is timeliness of delivery of that seed. And again, the overall score is an average of the 12 scores, that is the 3 indicators and 4 crops. And as you can see, the picture is more of yellow, which is not so good. And to give the details, some examples, there is very strong correlation between the adequacy of early generation seed and availability of resources for breeding and variety maintenance. Countries with well-resourced institutions such as South Africa, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Benin, and Egypt have performed well in all 3 sub-areas. Somalia, Mozambique, Comoros, Mauritania, and the Republic of Congo access to early generation seed is constrained by insufficient quantities and late delivery to seed producers. Indicator number 6 is on availability of crop variety choice, that is the number of varieties that were sold to farmers in 2022. And again, we assumed a linear relationship between the number of crop varieties sold. So if there was 1 to 100 varieties sold, the score was between 1 and 8. If the varieties were 101 to 200, the score was greater than 8 to 10, and over 200 varieties, the score was 10. Again, this approach captures the stage of growth of the seed sector in a country. And as you can see in the picture there are a number of reds, which is not a good thing. Examples, highest number of varieties for the 4 crops sold. South Africa again leads, followed by Kenya, Zambia, Nigeria, and Senegal. When we break this down by the number of crops, Zambia and Kenya lead on maize in the hundreds. For rice, Madagascar and Mali, but the numbers are slightly lower. Sorghum is Mali and Nigeria. Groundnuts, Senegal, Central African Republic, and Cameroon and Cote d'Ivoire lead with the cassava varieties. Again, we're seeing a number of countries benefiting from the regional catalogs to access varieties for their farmers. Indicator number 7 is utilization of quality commercial seed. And here we are looking at the estimation of the volumes needed. And we used 2 ways to get this. We computed the estimates based on land under cultivation, the seeding rates for by crop, and replacement rates. So 100% for hybrids and 33% for the open pollinated varieties, the OPVs. The second option was to get country provided estimates. And we had another 2 approaches here. Some countries gave the actual sales, used actual sales from the previous year. South Africa is one good example. Others set targets whereby they sit with the private sector and consider adoption rates, requirements for subsidy programs or other initiatives. And some countries like Benin, Central African Republic, Chad, Eritrea, Niger, Nigeria, Senegal, Togo, Zambia, Zimbabwe do this as a way of estimating their seed requirements. And looking at the outcome is that only 2 countries, South Africa and Zimbabwe, were able to meet 100% of all their seed requirements for the 4 crops. 9 out of 44 countries that provided this data, only 9 met over 80% of the combined average seed requirements for the 4 priority crops. 75% of the countries met less than half of the combined average national seed requirements. So there's a lot of undersupply of the seed to satisfy national requirements. Indicator number 8 is clarity of import-export regulations. Here, countries started to perform well. 21 countries scored excellent, which is the dark green, implying that the regulations are clear and they are enforced by the relevant agency. 12 countries scored good, the light green, showing that the import regulations are clear, but there's room for improvement through, for example, digitization and online processing. 9 countries scored fair, that's the yellow, because the guidelines for seed trade were not followed consistently or were not understood by the seed traders. 5 countries there, South Sudan, Somalia, Madagascar, and Mauritania. So 4 countries scored poor because they have no formal seed regulations that define procedures for trade. Examples of countries using this importing seed, 34 out of the 47 countries imported seed, implying that there is quite a bit of trade between countries in the continent. 9 out of the 10 leading maize importing countries are in the COMESA and SADC region. This is expected, but you have outliers like Ghana in West Africa, that is also a leading importer of maize. However, these volumes need to be taken with caution because even the government officials themselves indicated to us that in many countries, not all imports are tracked or recorded. So what we have may not be the complete picture. Indicator number 9 is the adequacy of agro-dealer networks. And we are looking at registered agro-dealers and their distribution across urban and rural areas. However, this is hard to ascertain in most countries. Therefore, we resorted to working with qualitative score, expert opinion on the adequacy of the agro-dealers. Guinea-Bissau, the countries in red, Guinea-Conakry, Libya, Nigeria, and Sudan, the number of active, they are not actually the countries in red here, sorry. The countries listed here, the number of agro-dealers are not known. So that's a surprise. Going further, the number of registered agro-dealers were quite varied quite widely, ranging from 2 in Burundi to more than 8,000 in Tanzania. The 4 countries that are doing well on this indicator are Rwanda, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Tanzania, where the agro-dealer networks function well and meet farmers' needs. Out of the 47 countries, 14 countries have active agro-dealer networks, but need improvements in either the number of agro-dealers or their distribution, or both. 27 countries have low number of agro-dealers, and most of them are in the urban areas, so they're not reaching farmers. Eritrea, Guinea-Conakry, Guinea-Bissau do not have agro-dealers at all. Indicator number 10 is the availability of seed in small packages. This is the proportion of seed sold in 2 kilograms or less out of the total seed sold. Packaging of seed in small packages makes it affordable for smallholder farmers and increases the adoption of improved seed. As can be seen in the map, most countries do not offer seed for the top 4 crops in small packages. The countries that are doing well in this area, Tanzania, Namibia, Rwanda, and Kenya, supplied 83 to 99% of the seed of the 4 priority crops in packages of 2 kilograms or less. In 25 countries, less than 30% of the seed for the 4 priority crops was sold in packages of 2 kilograms or less. In 15 countries, no seed of the 4 priority crops was sold in packages that were 2 kilograms or less. And in some of these countries, it's the law that set these limits that didn't give the leeway to have these small packages. Countries like Egypt, Ethiopia, and Senegal, they have higher package sizes that are stipulated. This is also governed by the land size available. In a country like South Africa, most crop production is carried out by large-scale farmers, and so they go for the larger packages. Indicator number 11 is the status of national seed policy instruments. And here we are looking at the instruments whether the instruments promote competitive seed sectors. We do not track implementation because we felt that it was tracked implicitly in the other 16 indicators. Interestingly, most of the countries have up-to-date seed policy instruments. You can see a lot of green in this map here. Even countries with low overall scores performed well in this indicator. The only country that stands out is Libya, and this is mainly because we couldn't ascertain the status of the policy instruments. Nobody could trace them for us. Indicator number 12 is closely related to the 11 on the policy instruments. And here we are looking at alignment of the national instruments with the regional regulations. Out of the 5 active regional communities, 3, that is COMESA, ECOWAS, and SADC, have harmonized seed regulations that are being implemented. Across the continent, 23 countries have completed the harmonization process, and the regulations are being implemented nationally. In 12 countries, the harmonization process is incomplete. Countries like Central African Republic, Somalia, and Libya are yet to start the process with their respective regs. Indicator number 13 is on the status of biosafety frameworks. And 64% of the countries surveyed have national biosafety frameworks. So this is encouraging. However, 10 out of the 47 countries, only 10 out of the 47 scored excellent, indicating that the frameworks have been adopted and are overseen by a national biosafety authority or committee. 16 countries scored good, showing that the instruments are either not fully implemented or regulations to operationalize the instruments are not in place. 7 countries have drafted laws, 2 countries are drafting the laws, and 3 regulate biosafety through other laws. 9 countries, the ones indicated in red, have no biosafety frameworks. Indicator number 14 looks at the status of farmer-managed seed systems. And here we are looking at how whether they are recognized in seed policy instruments. It's only 8 countries out of the 47 that scored excellent in that recognize farmer-managed seed systems in their seed policies and have substantive regulations to support it. Examples are Uganda, Zambia, but we have others there, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Tanzania, and others that are also supporting this system. In 19 countries, farm-managed seed systems are recognized in the policy instruments, but are not implemented, or laws are in draft mode. Indicator number 15 is the adequacy of seed inspection services. And here we're looking at the availability of human resources available for inspection, seed inspection. And an interesting point is that some 10 countries have authorized private seed inspectors to augment the role of the public seed inspectors. South Africa has only private seed inspectors. There are no public inspectors. Some countries have a high number of seed inspectors, exceptionally high. Egypt with 900, South Africa 320, Benin 254, Nigeria 152, Senegal 120. 62% of the countries scored 6 or more, so they were in the good to excellent category, indicating that seed inspection is functional, but some aspects needed improvement. The major constraint in this indicator was funding for the seed inspection services. Indicator number 16 is government efforts to combat counterfeit seed. It's related to indicator number 15 on seed inspection. And what we find out is that 53% of the countries reported concerted efforts by the governments to combat production and sale of counterfeit seed. 8 countries have strict oversight of fields and warehouses, seed sampling and seed testing. But counterfeit seed continues to be a challenge and needs enhanced support and enforcement of the current regulations. Lastly, we look at the adequacy of national seed associations. And here we score 6 performance areas for each association. And these are the activity on important seed sector issues, democracy and governance, effectiveness in advocacy, managerial ability, provision of value to members, and ability to mobilize resources. Some 15 countries in the continent do not have national seed associations and scored 0. These are the ones highlighted in red. Now, out of the 32 countries that have national seed association, we found that the associations serve as a voice of the private sector, but that in some countries they are broader than just serving, including just the seed companies, but include a diverse array of seed industry actors. The highest average scores within the associations that are performing well were in democracy in elections and decision making, effectiveness in advocacy, and managerial ability. The lowest score was on ability to mobilize resources. 72% of the associations are members of the African Seed Trade Association. So ladies and gentlemen, I come to the conclusions. And the first is that South Africa emerges on top on many indicators. This is driven by a robust and well-structured seed sector, effective variety risk protocols, extensive breeding programs, and a sophisticated national agricultural research system where both public and private sectors complement each other. Botswana, the Republic of Congo, Djibouti, Lesotho, Seychelles score 0 on several indicators, indicating deficiencies in system infrastructure or lack of formalized variety risk processes. Harmonization of seed regulations and regional seed catalogs provides critical access to seed for countries with less developed breeding programs. And then agricultural research institutes and the frameworks leading them are constrained by insufficient human capital and inadequate funding and outdated infrastructure. Accessibility and choice of seed varieties available to smallholder farmers is critical for crop diversification and resilience, and increased investments in seed systems, improved regulatory frameworks, and a push towards regional harmonization are needed to bolster agricultural productivity and sustainability. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to acknowledge a number of groups here. AGRA and the African Union Commission, Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, Economy and Sustainable Environment for financial support. The technical team at TASAI for the development of the index, the data analysis and drafting of this report. Member states for participating in the exercise. Country seed experts and regional experts for supporting data collection process. Individuals at AGRA and AUC for reviewing the work as it was progressing, and seed sector experts who participated in validation of the findings across the whole process. And finally, the steering committee of the Africa Seed and Biotechnology Platform of the African Union Commission for its support across the whole process, guiding us to get the seed experts and also in reviewing and validating the work. Thank you very much for your participation. And the report is available for download and the link indicated on the left. If you scan the QR code indicated on the right, you can also download the report. And for further inquiries, we are open to comments. We would like to get an exchange with you and we'll report back. Thank you very much. And I hand you over back to Krisztina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you, Ed, as well, for this excellent presentation. I know we had to breeze through this quite quickly because we wanted to leave enough time for our question and answer session. But as you saw, the report is available online. You can download it as a PDF. The website that Michael was referring to, the SSPI-Africa website, there are also ways for you to engage with the data a bit interactively. You can download the country reports for individual countries. You can also access the maps that we were showing you per indicator. So if anybody has interest in digging deeper into the report and the data, it's all available for you. So please definitely visit the site. So as we said, we would like to open it up for some question and answer session. We left enough time for that. What we'll do is I will ask my colleague Shon to make sure that the microphones are enabled now, so that when people unmute themselves, we will actually hear them. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to try to monitor. I'm seeing all of the all of you on the screen. So if you put up your hand, then I'm gonna, hopefully I should be able to see question or people as they're putting up their hands, and then I will call on you and you can unmute yourself, ask your question. Please just try to be as brief and to the point as possible so that we can fill as many questions as possible in the time we have left. And then one of our team members will answer the question. And then please unmute yourself when you finished asking your questions, just so we avoid background noise. Yes, and as I said, we'll try to answer as many of your questions as possible. But if we don't get to all of them, you saw the email shared, Michael's email, or you can just write to us at info@tasai.org with any follow-up questions. So we did get some questions in the question and answer box as well. I think, yes, I do see a hand up. I think maybe, oh, it looks like Michael and Ed have responded to that. So that's fine. Then let me go to Aggie Konda. I see a hand up there. So please go ahead and I guess state your, I can read the names, but if you state your name and your organization and then go ahead and ask the question. The floor is yours. Thank you. Oh, you cannot unmute.
Okay.
So Shon,
now the button has come off. Yeah. No, thank you very
much.
Oh,
it's good. Mike. Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you, team, for this presentation, and excited to see that we are continuing to disseminate this work. I wanted to ask just two questions. Number one is, what do you want from this meeting? What do you want this team in this meeting to do more of using this report other than downloading it? That is my number one question, which is basically to say, if there's one message you would like us to take out, what is that one message, and who should we be using that message to achieve what? Yeah. That is one. The second question I had, which is around the lessons learned. It is exciting to see that we have some outliers like South Africa in the conclusion. And this question is to Michael. My question for reflection is, to what extent is the size of the farm holding in South Africa influencing this result? And therefore, is there anything we can replicate in other markets, especially where we have smallholder farmers, as opposed to large-scale farming in some other countries, or not? So therefore, is this conclusion sufficient for us to use as a way to say we can learn from South Africa and build the same across other markets? And my last question is that, is there a correlation between the functionality of seed system and food security? Food and nutrition security. Is there a correlation that you observed in this study that we can then take out as part of our advocacy messages so that we can begin to support countries to fast track these lessons and make the adequate investment? Thank you, and over.
Great. Thank you so much for those excellent questions. I think the first one I'll ask Ed to respond. The second one was for Michael. Right, Ed? So the first one is the main message. And then the third one, Mainza, I guess if you can take that on, the correlation between food security and the findings. So, but if anybody else has a quick jump in to add to that, then go ahead. Go ahead, Ed.
Thank you. Thanks for joining in and for that, actually, 3 very excellent questions. So yes, you're right. What does this all mean? What do we want you to take home from here? My understanding is that, based on my read of the participants, these are really people that are interested in seed sector development, but mostly working at country level. So we believe that reports like this, they don't change the world. What changes the world is actions by people who are sitting in the audience here. So the key message is, if you're working in your country, for you to go to that country report and look at the different areas where your country is underperforming. With that, there's also information in other countries that are doing very well on those particular indicators. One of the key messages is that we believe that by having this kind of data available, we can have a peer learning mechanism. So if your country is scored low on availability of seed in small packages, there are countries, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, that are doing very well in those particular countries. So my core message is that look at the area where your country is underperforming, identify those, and then look at the countries that are doing well on that particular measure, and we can see what can we learn from there. This has to be an ongoing conversation. It's not going to be done overnight, but we hope that by creating this kind of platform, we can create a peer learning mechanisms where African countries can learn from each other. So maybe that's in a very short way, a way to say what we want people to get from here. Action is at country level. You guys are the frontline soldiers in transforming seed sector, but we now have a tool that allows you to say, if you want to improve your country's bottleneck, here are the countries that are doing well on that particular space. With that, I'll hand over to Michael for the other question.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Aji, for those questions. It's great for this session. South Africa might look like an outlier when you look at the other countries in the continent, but then it's a good example in a number of areas. As Ed updated, it's always good to look at the peers and see who else are we comparing ourselves, who can we compare ourselves with, and why are they doing well or are they doing badly? Then we can see how we improve. A number of 3 areas that I see South Africa doing well. One is strong NARIs. The second one, and it's across the board, is enforcement of the law. And this is, when laws are followed, then systems work. And we see them going even a stage further, whereby there is self-regulation in the industry itself. When industry starts to regulate itself, they can't accept a mistake from their part, then the systems become very strong. It doesn't mean that it's 100% rosy in the country. We see the country performing poorly in in the area of farmer managed seed systems being recognized in the policy instruments, so that's not recognized, and also in availing seed in small seed packages. So a large group of smallholder farmers are left out in this process. So South Africa also has something to learn from the other countries in these two areas. So there's a lot of learning to be taken by everyone in the continent. Thanks. Over to you, Krista.
Thank you, Michael, for that answer. Mainza, are you online to answer the third question? And then we have a question in the chat that we'll take next. Go ahead, Mainza.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to address a bit briefly the correlation between food and nutrition security and the findings. We did not track that explicitly to find out is there a link between countries that perform well or perform poorly and their nutrition outcomes, but the theory is very clear. Once you have a good seed system, it leads to good production outputs, which lead to good household outputs as well. One thing we try to do is by expanding the scope of crops to 4, we not just limit it to cereals, but have a group of legumes as well. And legumes also contribute to that household nutrition security. And the idea is that once the seed system across those 4 crops is quite robust, you get increased output for those 4 crops, leading to outcomes at the country level as well. So we didn't track it explicitly, but the assumption can be, yes, good performing seed systems would lead to good output, would lead to good nutrition outcomes at the household level. Thank you. Back to you, Krista.
Thanks very much, Mainza. Just adding to that quickly, it's just popping into my head that it sounds like that could be a very interesting follow-on study or thinking about what this data can be used for, that perhaps there's other research that somebody's interested in and this research can feed into that. So that's something that we would certainly be interested in. So let me take this question from the chat, and then I see we have a question from David Situma as well. So David was asking, how do you consider the number of released varieties as a solid indicator, although there are considerable differences among countries regarding the so-called effective variety release protocols? Some countries may not have effective variety release procedures and may release quite a large number of varieties. So that's the question on between, I guess, the processes and the number of releases, and how is that a solid indicator? Michael or Mainza, or well, I guess any one of you. Michael, maybe we can start with you on this question. I don't know if I should repeat it. Yeah, you see it. Okay.
Repeat it. I missed it.
Yes, so it says, how do you consider the number of released varieties as a solid indicator, although there are considerable differences among countries regarding the so-called effective variety release protocols? So some countries may not have effective variety release procedures and may release quite a number of varieties. I don't know if you recall what we saw in terms of that, or anybody else can jump in, Ed or Mainza.
I could try to address that, Krista. I think that, sure, with all these different indicators, they're far from perfect. They're yardsticks that you start from. And I think overall, when you take the whole combination of 17, you start to get something that's a little bit more fair. But in general, you'll see that there's quite a good correlation between variety release mechanisms in a country and what varieties are being released out of that system. There will be some outliers. You're right. We see in some countries there's a spike in 1 year and nothing happens for several years. Then there's another spike in number of varieties released. When you look at the individual country reports, we do try to unpack where those anomalies might occur. Like we would say, for example, in this particular country, they're facing these challenges here. So beyond the hard numbers themselves, it's quite important that you read the narrative as well. So we do count, it's just a yardstick. You need to have something to measure and count. And that's one of the outputs that you can measure. But indeed, that output is really a function of what happens before there. Far from perfect, but when you look at the individual country narrative, there's quite some explanatory notes for those countries that might be outliers of and out.
Thanks, Ed. And I see Mainza and Michael hand up. So if you want to make some brief comments, and then I'm turning to David afterwards. Thank you. Or thank you, Michael, then go ahead.
Yes. Sorry, I was responding to something. Yes, I am following up on what Ed is saying. And if you look especially on these indicators like the adequacy of the NARIs and say availability of early generation seed, the breaking down of this indicator into sub-indicators helped us understand the nuances in these processes. And what we find is the strong correlation between the strong NARIs and the AGS being produced, and that cascades also to the varieties that are available for sale to farmers. And when you look at the breakdown of these sub-indicators and look at the hard numbers, these are indicated in the hard ratings, indicated in Appendix 1, you can already see patterns forming there. The countries that are performing very well, you see either very strong breeding programs and good funding, and then you see, and when you look at the early generation seed, you see the quality and the delivery and timeliness will be very, very critical. And quantity will be very, very critical in getting the seed systems moving. And so these patterns already tell us something, and you can already start to make inferences on how a country can improve itself if it wants to jump from a lower stage to a higher stage. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much for that additional information, Michael. So David Situm, I see your hand up. Please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question. Thank you very much. And then we can see, I can see another question maybe from Joseph. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Krisztina, and also for Michael for that critical question. My questions are around.
Unfortunately, I can't hear you, sorry.
Yes, your line doesn't seem to be so clear. Try one more time, and then if it doesn't work, maybe you can do the chat. You can place your question, but go ahead one more time.
Yeah,
it's better now.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. We can hear you.
You can hear
me? It's good. Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I say that, okay, first of all, I want to appreciate the presenters of today. The information was very informative. My question is around indicator number 15. It talks about adequacy of human resources available for seed inspection. I was wondering whether you went ahead and also looked at the adequacy in terms of the knowledge, the skills of those seed inspectors, or only look at the number that are already trained for seed inspection. Number two, on the same line, whether you found out about the current ratio of inspector vis-a-vis farmer. And if that current ratio is available, what would be your recommended ratio for inspector to farmer ratio that will be recommended for the seed inspection? Thank you.
Thank you very much for those questions. I guess Mainza, Michael, one of you, I know this is sort of a recurring issue even with TASAI studies, the question about inspectors. So Mainza, I see you unmuted yourself. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try and respond to them. I'll start from the second one. It's a very good question. Initially, we had wanted to calculate this as a ratio, but not for seed inspectors to farmers, but seed inspectors to land inspected. So we tried doing that, but the numbers we got were not responding and not a good reflection of what was the actual truth in the country. So we ended up tracking the numbers of seed inspectors, but also doing an opinion question, which had a very solid rubric around it, which give a more accurate picture of the status of the seed inspection services. But we have tried it using a different denominator that you pointed out, but we tried it as well. On skills, no, we didn't track the skills. But if you go into the report, we have comments that support whatever numbers, whatever ranking is there on that specific indicator. And sometimes when common challenge like shortage of lack of funds or lack of transport or lack of resources to do seed inspection, once that comes out, we also mention it there. But on the skill set and the skill capacity, no, we didn't track that one specifically. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mainza. I see two questions, so we'll go to Mohammed Lemin Daoud. Please excuse my pronunciation if it's not quite correct for your name, and then Joseph Ahenda afterwards. So over to you, Mohammed. Thank you. Oh, don't forget to unmute yourself. Can you hear us? Or maybe let's take Joseph's question then, and while Mohammed sorts out his microphone. Go ahead, Joseph.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, TASAI team, for the nice report. It's quite informative. The area that I wanted to seek clarification on is related to variety release process. I think while the number of varieties is a key indicator of the successful variety release procedure, it may not be complete because sometimes you find that institutions that are participating in the process are inadequate, and that leads to low quality variety which have been released, and therefore you find the farmers are not adopting them because they're not really better than what is existing. By this, I mean, like, for example, in some countries, the variety release process is dominated by the research institutions, whereby the researchers breed varieties, and after that, they do their own testing and release. So you can see that's a process that is bound to be biased. So you'll find in most cases, the varieties that are released are not really adding value to the farmers. And another area that I wanted to comment on is on Burundi. Burundi released almost the most, because we are talking of 55 varieties being released. But again, if you look at the breeding program of Burundi, it was among the poorest. So I'm wondering how the two are really matching. When it comes to variety release, it's topping up in terms of the numbers released, but coming down to the capacity to do the breeding work, the capacity is a bit low. Maybe I need clarification on that. And then the second one is on EGS production. It will be very good to also look at the proportion of the EGS produced by the public sector and the private sector. Because you'll find that in most mature systems, the EGS production is dominated by the private sector. And that's because normally public sector are not good in business. And therefore, you'll find most of the time, if they don't get external support, then you find the production of EGS dropping. So it will be good when assessing the capacity of EGS production in a country, it is fair to look at the contribution of the private sector, because that's the only sustainable sector that can be able to continue the production economically. Then the last one is when looking at the participation of the Seeds Association, it would be good to look at also their contribution to the decision in the seed industry. Because most of the seed associations sometimes are suppressed by the public sector, such that they're not able even to really contribute to the decision making in the seed industry. So while they're doing the advocacy, the impact of the advocacy will depend on how effectively they are influencing the policy decision in the country where they are. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those questions. And in fact, what I'm hearing is some questions and some suggestions. So I guess I'll turn it over to Mainza, Michael, or Ed to respond to, I guess, the question. And I would say, feel free to, if a suggestion is something that you think the team might be looking at, because we are working on the next version, you can also defer that to that is something that we are considering or will take into account, because some of these were more suggestions. So I guess unmute yourself, Mainza, Michael, or Ed, if you have a response. First on the breeder question, Michael, go ahead, and then other people can jump in.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph, for these questions. Yes, the variety release process was involved, and that we didn't get into that detail, but looks like it's an area that we should expand into to improve the learning and probably the results that we get. For Burundi, the varieties list, you are right. If you look at the brief, you see that you notice that the varieties were released by a Kenyan company and Chinese. So it's a reflection that the national system is not as strong as indicated. EGS, yes, again, is we if you look at the write-up, you see we try to identify where the EGS is coming from. In a number of briefs, you see where there is collaboration between the public and private sectors, And in others where we see the NARIs just working maybe on their own, and if they're working the CG and the like. And this is something we're following up, and we will continue to do. And it's true that, you know, a lot of contribution, if we get the private sector growing in this area, then it's leading to a more sustainable way of getting the seed. Seed trade associations, contributions to decisions. Yeah, this is where they are working on the advocacy and the effectiveness in advocacy. Unfortunately, we can't track the only way we can track this effectiveness is by looking at what, you know, how the members view that the effectiveness of the association in contributing to changes that have occurred in the say the policy environment and such. And this is the question we're looking at, value to members and also advocacy efforts that the association plays. And so we feel that if the members feel that the association is not useful, we usually get these rankings being very, very harsh in the country studies that TASAI does. So we feel like we are capturing that well, but some of the other areas will be their lessons for us to improve as we move along. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Ed or Mainza, do you want to add anything before we move on to the last question? I think will be from Mohammed. Go ahead, Ed.
I just wanted to make a quick addition on that fair criticism, I'll have to say, on the number of varieties that are being released. It does not really reflect the quality of the process. If you have a terrible system, it's likely that the number of varieties that are coming out of there are not likely to be very good. But I really would want to encourage all of us to look beyond. That's just a measure of R&D. We also have the number of crop choices available to farmers, which I think is a much more accurate number, because in most countries, less than 10% of these varieties end up even getting commercialized or seeing the light of day. So it's only a good, strong indicator on research and development, but you really need to pair that along with this number of varieties that are actually available on the market to farmers to adopt. So you see there's some relationship between the two. The more you have available on the shelves, the more you have varieties that are being used out there. So this is just a cautionary note to say, don't look each of the indicators in isolation. There's often 2 or 3 other indicators related to that might also help shed further insight on each of those different parameters. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Ed. And I'm noting we have just a few minutes left, but Mohammed, I see you've been trying your questions. So let's see if you can ask. Please keep it brief, and then we'll try to answer your question. And if for some reason it doesn't work, you can follow up with us afterwards, of course. We'll welcome that. Go ahead. I see that you're still muted, so I'm not seeing. Yeah, I'd love to get your question in, but I think what we'll do is please do reach out to us, or if you can now place your comment or question in the chat, and the team can reach out to you to ask the question. I'm sorry that it didn't work out. But yes, we're coming up on our closing, and in closing, I just wanted to first of all thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy day. I know everybody is very busy these days, so we appreciate you joining us and spending this hour plus with us. We also really want to thank Dr. George Bigirwa from AGRA for being here, and for the opening comments in particular, and for the support we have received and we will continue to receive from AGRA. We're really grateful for this collaboration and partnership. Same for the African Union Commission. I don't believe that they were able to join us today, but they have been steadfast supporters of this work as well. I wanted to also acknowledge, I put a chat in there, that we do actually have quite a few, maybe about 10 countries, representatives from 10 countries who were involved in the research work. So big thanks to you for making this work possible, and also for joining us today. So we really appreciate that. I wanted to let all of you know that this recording is going to be on our website, or rather on our YouTube channel, and linked to our website. We're just gonna set it up suitable for YouTube. So we will share that with everybody. So if you'd like to either go back or share it with colleagues, if this is something that was useful and interesting to you, then please do so. Please share. And as we mentioned, we are already working on getting the SSPI ready for the next round of data collection, which is going to take place in 2025. We are reviewing the methodology and making some tweaks to it as we speak. And of course, it will feed into the next round of the CADEP biannual review, data collection, and the report. So we're really excited about that. As we said in the beginning, or when Michael was finishing up, all this information is available online, the report for download, and then also our team for further follow-up, suggestions, comments. We always welcome those. So with, yes, Michael is putting back the slides so that you can see the websites there. So if there are, with no further questions remaining or questions to be saved for the, for communicating with the team afterwards, I want to thank everybody for being here, our speakers, our partners. We greatly appreciate your attention today. Thank you so much, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Thanks.